I'd like to ask you a question, but then because you mentioned that one of the topmost in the hierarchy in industrial design, the topmost element is aesthetics. You mentioned that they design from outward to they go from outward inward, unlike the engineering designer who designs from inside. Yeah. So I would like to ask, does it mean that aesthetics is not important to the engineering design? Because even in the hierarchy, we see it ranking very low, very low. And if it's not, why? If it is, why?
I mean, it's a very good question. I think whether you're an engineer or not, okay, for anything to work, you need to have some form of form. There has to be some form of, physical, tangible element to it. So, yes, as engineers, engineering designers, you still need to factor in aesthetics because the function is dependent on form, and that's how I tend to rationalize, aesthetics. Because again, when we're in, at university, polytechnics, and we're being trained as engineers, it was kind of like, we don't really care about that. But think about it. For a pulley to function as a pulley, it has to take a certain form. For a gear to function as a gear, it has to take a certain form. So for everything that's out there, bearings and all of that, they have to take a certain form. So that's what I would more or less quantify as engineering aesthetics. Because either way, it needs to take a certain form to yield that intended function. Whereas with the industrial designer, product aesthetics is more important because, again, it's the appeal of the product that will generate that income. So the two need to move hand in hand. And you still need to have that element as part of your transdisciplinary function within the business. So let's say, for example, someone that has breast cancer, okay? So you've got the point where you need to think about, okay, how do you operate the person to remove the tumor? Well, you also need to think about, okay, how do you also think about, ensuring that you redefine what's been removed to look similar to what already exists. So you can view the surgeon that specializes in removing the tumor as the engineering designer, and the person that will be the industrial, the person that comes in to, provide that that counseling for the person to get back to the general population. That will be your use. Because again, you still need to think about, even with the tooling and all of that, the surgical tools and things like that have been designed, to ensure that the person can be operated in comfort, even though, we've also got this, that needs to ensure that the person is quite comfortable. So all those elements be what the user said the desire could be defined as the room for operation and things like that. And I was watching something where even the lights could be an issue for certain patients. So all that needs to be factored. Yeah. So I just digressed.
Yeah, that was
about again. Yeah, that's kind of like the key thing. So as designers, we still need to factor in aesthetics. So let's look at a situation whereby you wanted to make a fufu machine. So at least you're familiar with fufu. I mean, that's something that So there was this design that some people from one of the African universities, West African universities, they're trying to develop some form of a machine to kind of like yield the dumpling, the starchy dumpling. So if you look at the traditional form, you've got your water, you've got someone, holding a piston and and they're creating the dumpling. You've got someone using your hands to manipulate the dumpling to ensure that you reduce the number of lumps and also have different textures and things like that. So how do you capture all of that? But again, you also need to think about how do you transition that technology, from its traditional state, which has been used thousands and thousands of years, to, the 20th, 21st century. So, in that particular design, they decided to, have like some form of hopper, whereby they transfer the ingredients into, and you've got some form of pressure screw, generating device that would then kind of mash, flush, and push out the dumpling, so that the dumpling comes out and it can be formed. But again, you have to go beyond that, because how have you gone about configuring the machine to ensure that, number one, it can cater towards people that love different textures and different mixes of, the starchy dumpling or fufu. But some people will like this content. Some people like it with yam. Some people like it with cassava, even cocoyam, or a combination of cassava and plantain and things like that. And people will like to have different textures to it. So how do you go about doing that? You also need to think about, eliminating the hazards. So again, the traditional method, if you're not very dexterous, you can easily get injured, because again, that is coming down with a lot of force. So even with the piston, it can split and go into your hands, or you can probably, decide to pound someone's hands off. So you need to think about that. But what I realize in terms of African countries typically is that because they don't acknowledge the industrial design elements of it, what tends to mostly be pushed to market is the product that is, functional prototype stage. And that becomes an issue because you go, okay, you've come up with a solution. So if we look at this example there, it looks like you've got like a generator that's driving some pulley shaft, and that pulley shaft is driving, the pressure screw to push out the dumpling. Okay, so that's some form of functional thing. But again, is it hygienic? Is it safe? Because again, that's a petrol generator. It makes sense if you think about the issues with electricity. So you ask yourself, okay, what would be another alternative? You use solar panels for that instead of using petrol. And if you have to use petrol, what would be the ideal distance of that element from the machine, from the user? Because again, you're working in an environment that has a lot of flammable, material about. So we need to think about all of that. How do you go about cleaning it? So again, from that particular design, it's very difficult to see how they're going to go about cleaning it, especially if this is going to be set up in the chop bar somewhere. So again, that has to go through different iterations to ensure that, number one, you safeguard and improve the function, but at the same time, you've packaged it in such a way that is ideal for the market, whether it's going to be directed towards the domesticated market or it's going to be directed towards the commercial market. All these elements do need to be, taken on board. That's quite big. Okay, I do get it. Maybe it might be for the chop bars and things like that. But as I stated, have they really thought of the operability of the end user in terms of the end user's knowledge, in terms of the end user's technical dexterity? Have they thought about the methods? If something were to break, how easy is it for the user to make the repairs to run the device? So these are some of the things that need to be considered, that need to be factored. And that's why industrial design is important water. It goes hand in hand. So you might have the technologies, but how do you package it? How do you reduce the bulk? That's quite heavy. That's quite bulky. But these are some of the things you need to think about. You also need to think about how the product will compete with the new ways of making a dumpling. But right now it comes in powder form and things like that. So how do you compete against that? Now some people, because I'm assuming that there's a distinct taste between the two. I don't think that
I know
taste
I know the risk.
exactly. I don't think it tastes the same as the traditional way of going about it. So there's a number of elements that need to be factored in there to ensure that you can still use current technologies in effectively making this dumpling, but at the same time being able to capture the essence of the end product. So so I think moving forward, it's important that there's that element. That elements of concurrent engineering do need to come into the fore, whereby at the front end bit you've got the right skill set or the right skilled labor group there to capture what the information is about the pound, the future machine, and how that can then be further developed, further repackaged to suit the market. Because again, if people are not buying it, then that's just a waste of time. It might do the job, but if it's difficult to handle, if it's difficult to clean, because there's a hygiene element that needs to be factored in. Because again, you have all sorts of bacterial growth, and the parts that's difficult to clean. So all that will be concerning for the end user. So you still need to think about it. How do you make that transition at the front end by using the skill set of the industrial design to visualize what the product should look like, or come up with the real ideas on how the product will look like for the market, the marketing people to really capture that data by engaging and interviewing people from chop bars, people from catering services, people from the hospitality industry. What would be ideal, at least from their perspective, with all that captured and embedded into the product? Likewise with the ergonomists, they need to look at the mechanics of how that work is done and how that can then be filtered into the design for the product. Then you need to also ensure they've got the various specialists, like what would be the ideal material to ensure that we're not having issue with material growth and things like that. At the same time, the materials are durable, not to fail at the time. Manufacturing too, because again, depending on the market and the mass of and the volume of the product that needs to be pushed to market, how do you go about that? How do we go about looking at the logistics in that regard? So we do need to ensure that all these players are on board to optimize and push the product towards the market. So that's kind of my viewpoints in that regard.
Interesting. To see how you move from the front end to the back end and the various functions, responsibilities.
Yeah. Because it is a multidisciplinary, it's a multidisciplinary, multifunctional event. So you can't have, one group of people that they wouldn't have the understanding of everything. And considering that, particularly in African countries and all of that, they're still chained to the colonial mindset of doing things, where in the past, when it came to making machinery like that, it was only done through mechanical engineering or through the engineering routes, and it hasn't really evolved. So to catch up with the rest of the world, we do need to start thinking about, okay, what can we do to ensure that we can make our own goods and push it to our own people, while understanding, the culture of of our demography, and to ensure that that influences the way that things are done. So what I'm saying is we need to find our own identity in making things to cater to the market. So again, with a number of countries now advocating to have an open market, this presents an opportunity for countries to collaborate and start looking at advancing the skill set of the human resource on the continent to start converting the resources from its raw state to its final state.
Yeah, we'll talk about that going forward. It's a very good point you have raised, and I will let you address that point in more details at the end of this interview.